Hi there, I'm Drew Badger, the world's #1 English fluency guide, and it is a pleasure to welcome you to another advanced listening practice lesson. This is going to be another interesting lesson since we're talking about politics, or I've made a few videos on the channel, one recently about Donald Trump, and I wasn't really talking about my political views. I was just trying to describe him as a person, and I picked Trump just because he's in the news and other people will be talking about him. So that way, if you can maybe learn to describe him as well, you can also understand what other people are saying, but you can also just be able to describe him well yourself. But actually, I forget who it was, but somebody in the comments was talking about, what would I do if I were president? And so since this is another thing that also comes up when people are talking about political things, especially during an election year, an election season, which seems, incredibly long in America, this is something I thought, well, why don't I also talk about that just to kind of explain maybe my personal views a little bit, but also give you some examples of things you can say. So when you're talking about things, you're having conversations with people about how you can get or what you would do when you were president or if you became president. This is just another common thing that most people talk about. And it's not just for presidential elections. You can also talk about it if I were the boss of the company, if I were the captain of the team, if I were the mayor of the town, whatever your situation it is you want to be talking about. This is just some examples of how you can explain that. So I'm going to be talking about this. I'll throw in a few vocabulary words as well. And I don't want to get into too many political things, but I just thought I would share some personal views about things just so maybe you can learn more about me and also get some, maybe some more interesting ways of describing things in your own life. So anyway, if I were president, and I don't think I could ever become president, even though now I am actually able to become president. I believe you only need to be 35 years old. So I'm 35 years old now. You need to be born in America, and I think maybe there are one or two other qualifications, but that's why maybe someone like Arnold Schwarzenegger could not become president of the United States because he wasn't born in America. But maybe people will change the rules later to allow foreigners to do that. Anyway, whether you agree with that rule or not, those are the rules we have in place. So if I were president, if I were president, I don't even think I could become president. I think maybe my views are a little bit, I don't know, kind of going back, maybe I don't want to be too confusing here. But typically in America, you have like the left and the right. And when people think like the left and the right, there are actually many other smaller groups and, political ideas that people have. But typically in America, we have the left and the right. So the left is the Democrats and the right is the Republicans. Or you can talk about the traditional views versus progressive views, or other ways. But basically, it's really one system that it's kind of like two different sides of that same system. So you'd never see people winning from outside of that one system. And typically the two sides of that system, they don't really argue with each other. So a lot of these people, like if you're a conservative, you believe maybe the government should be spending less money. You should have smaller government, trying maybe to help people do more things for themselves. And the progressive side, or the liberals, as they're called, the Democrats, maybe they believe that the government should do more to help more people. So maybe we should have bigger government programs in order to help poor people, or to help kids in schools when maybe they don't have a good opportunity to learn. So it's a question of what is the real role of government? What should government be trying to do? And I think that probably the ideal system is an interesting mix of many different things. So the problem most people have when they get into politics is they're thinking, well, I have to have, if I'm a liberal or I'm a conservative, then I have to believe all these different things. But instead, you really should be able to pick, a collection of, maybe some good things from this political philosophy or some other things from this political philosophy over here. And if you do that, then it's going to help you actually devise something new and interesting. Because you could look at a situation or a political system like communism where, basically the idea is from each according to his ability. So from each person, like if you are a strong person, we will take like your ability to act and all the strength that you have, and to each according to his need. This means that like if you need, personal health care or something like that, the government should provide that for you. So from each according to his ability and to each according to his need. So for each person, like if you can give a lot, we give a lot. If you can't give so much, give whatever you can, but then hopefully everybody gets taken care of. Now, the problem with something like communism is because in just general in the human mind, we can only maybe have a social group of about 150 people. And if you think about maybe you have like 1,000 or 2,000 or however many Facebook friends you have, you really only have a few people that you can actually remember things about. So typically the size of the human mind or the ability of the human mind to look at different social groups or talk about different people or interact with different people in on a daily basis in your everyday life, if you have more than 150 people, it makes it really difficult for you to have personal connections with these people. And if that's the case, then you're less likely to want to do things and to share things and to trust those people. So the further away you are from someone, the less you know that person, the less you trust them, the less you want to support that person and help that person and so on. So most people, they have, it's kind of the individual first, and then your family and your children and your close friends and working out of the circle from that. So the people on the inside, the closest to you, are the people that have your trust the most. These are the people maybe you would be willing to die for, or just even do everyday favors for, things like that, like helping people move. But if some random person walks up to you on the street and says, "Hey, I'm like moving to a new house, could you help me move?" You would say, "No, I mean, why would I do that?" I mean, maybe you would, but most people would not likely do that. And it just means that, they don't have a connection with that person. So communism, the idea of everybody helping and everybody working together, works in a small scale. So communism, we can't really say communism doesn't work or communism does work. It's more about the scale of the economy or the group of people. So again, like just being very quick, like smaller, maybe monkeys, they have a smaller brain and a smaller capacity to have a large group of, people living among them, something like that. So the social aspect of how you think and all the connections you have, it's kind of limited physically by the size of your brain and just how we've evolved. So maybe some monkeys, they have only a few members in their particular group, but we could have like many in ours. So we can have a lot of people in our group, but again, once you get beyond that number of about 150 people, you begin losing connections with them. So part of this, again, like I'm just talking very, very briefly, but very quickly. I know there's a lot we could go into about politics, a lot I could explain, but the important part, what I'm just speaking about up until now, is that you shouldn't have a situation where you only do one thing or only do something else. It's more, how can we pick the best things from many different political philosophies or situations to create the best society possible. So I don't want to limit myself and say, well, like socialism is bad, because if you think, like socialism is bad completely, it means you can't have a police force. So people pay for a police force or a fire department. And if you think about it, like let's say if I have a particular fire department and I have to personally pay that fire department, if there's a fire at my neighbor's house and that fire comes to my house and I didn't pay, I'm screwed. So I don't know really what I can do without having to pay, a particular fire department to have somebody manage, one particular house or a different fire department for another house in the same area. It doesn't really work so well. So there are some situations where a business or a private entity, so private, this is the opposite of a public thing, like a government-sponsored or a government-supported entity. This is why we have two different sets of organizations like that. But they can all, if we figure out a good way to have them work together, that's going to be probably the best thing for us. So I think it's a trap when people say like, well, I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat or something like this. I personally do not have a political affiliation because I really just don't care about having to fit into one particular set of beliefs when maybe something else might be appropriate. So anyway, that's kind of the foundation of the way I think. The other thing is that I think it's important to understand, like in the same way we're thinking about, like 150 people is something that's kind of like a biological thing that we should really think about, instead of maybe we try to have like 20,000 people working together in like a communist system where maybe it wouldn't work so well. And again, like maybe it would in some places, but typically it doesn't work so well without the close connections and trust that people have. And again, that's Not really possible with beyond a group of about 150 people. But just some other things about politics. I remember listening to Hillary Clinton speak one time, and I believe she actually wrote a book called It Takes a Village. It Takes a Village. And this is like an African proverb that says, it takes a village. So a village, like all the people in the village are required to raise a child. It takes a village to raise a child. So what this means is that typically, like in a village, you would have a child learning from lots of different people. This is what it really means to take a village to raise a child. Like, it doesn't mean it takes the government to raise a child. And I think the tricky thing is that when you have a system of government where people can vote and say, like, well, I want more money. And typically people that vote, like, let's like vote ourselves more money if we can have better benefits. Like, people are going to vote for those things. Presumably if it gets them more money in the short term, and maybe they're not thinking about the long-term benefit of what they should have. So it's a kind of a tricky thing where you're thinking about the government providing things for you or you providing things for yourself. So where do you create that? Maybe Hillary Clinton would believe that the government should be providing much more for people, where someone like me believes that I think it actually hurts people when you try to give them too much. And this is actually an interesting thing about aid. When you think about like sending like aid to Africa or maybe like any particular place, where like if you send aid, like aid money, particularly like I want to give like some t-shirts or something like that. I want to send clothing to this particular place that maybe they don't have much clothes, something like that. Now, what that actually does is like it provides some clothing, but it removes that part of the economy where people are creating clothes for themselves. So the more you do things for other people, the more you actually just give them things as opposed to educating them. And this is why I like to spend a lot of my time educating, is because if you don't do that, then people are just receiving aid and they teach, or you kind of teach them, you train those people to just do the same thing over and over again, where they don't have to rely on themselves in order to do things. They just wait for the more aid to come. Their own economy doesn't grow stronger because they don't have to do anything. And that's one of the problems with having a large government, is because you train people to actually just wait for things to come to them instead of actually going out and trying to get the things that they want. Another thing, the final thing I'll mention in this video, I don't want to talk about too many things, but if I were president, if I were actually president of the United States, probably one of the biggest things I would do, well, I would focus on education for sure, but I would include in education a lot of financial education, many other things about education that we can kind of important things that little kids and, even older students need to know, but they're just not taught in school. There's a lot of reasons for that, especially about money, like really first graders, second graders, even all the way up through high school. Very few students actually learn about finances in school. And because they don't learn about money, they make a lot of mistakes with money, and that creates a lot of larger economic problems that we have in America and certainly elsewhere. But I think probably the biggest thing that I would like to do is to encourage more entrepreneurship. So if you look at, I think I've spoken about this actually in maybe a previous video, but it's really important to have a situation where you can have multiple companies that are providing for the economy or like even the safety of a particular community. So if you look at even like a movie like Roger and Me, so this is a Michael Moore movie, a documentary where he's talking about Flint, Michigan. Now, Flint, Michigan was the home of General Motors. Or maybe even still is, I don't remember now. But the documentary it's really highlighting the fact that if you have a community with one business or one really strong business and everybody works for that community or everybody works for that business in that community, if something bad happens to that, like that business moves or that business goes bankrupt, everybody in the community is destroyed as a result. And it's really difficult to come back from that. I like to think of the analogy of a spider web. And if you have a spider web with only one string on it, that's going to be really, really bad if you cut that string. But a spider web with many, many strings on it, you can get holes in the spider web all over the place, but the spider web in general is still very strong. So I would much rather have a community where you have lots of thriving businesses, where lots of people are creating things for each other, because if some of them go bankrupt, something bad happens, then the whole system is still not destroyed. So it becomes much better to actually focus on individual families, individual businesses, those kind of things, producing more things to actually make the economy stronger. And so I would work more about that. Anyway, I don't plan on running for president this year. I think I'm probably a little bit late. But if you want to nominate me, feel free. You can write my name down if you are an American. Probably not so many native speakers watching this video series unless you're a teacher. But anyway, more than just listening to my views about politics, hopefully this has given you some food for thought, just some interesting ways of talking about politics so that you can think about just whenever you're watching other people or even when you're talking about yourself and you want to have an interesting discussion or just want to explain about how you would do something better. So if I were the boss, I would do this, or if I were the captain again of some sports team, I would do something like that. Anyway, that's it for this advanced listening practice lesson. I hope you have enjoyed it. If you have, feel free to nominate me for president, or you could just like the video. That'll be enough, I think. But put a comment down below if you have any personal views about that, if you agree with me, disagree with me, but please keep the comments nice and happy. We don't want to argue with each other about like this person is good and that person is bad. Most people have good and bad points. Even myself, maybe there's some things you disagree with. Anyway, if you have liked this video, do click that like button, do become a subscriber to the EnglishAnyone.com YouTube channel, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye. To continue learning, click on the link in this video to download Speak English Naturally, our free guide to speaking and sounding like a native English speaker. The guide reveals the 3 most important kinds of conversational English you must learn if you want to sound native, and will help you experience instant improvement in your fluency and speaking confidence. To download your free guide on a mobile device, click on the link in the upper right of this video. To download your free guide from a computer, click on the link in the lower right of this video. I look forward to seeing you in the guide.